Good evening, and welcome to the first installment of Quods Get Gold for 2023. We had some wonderful pieces last year, and Eli Gold and I have discussed the possibility of doing more this year because the response from many of the quads has been so good that we feel obligated to bring you more information as we can. The first one for 2023 is going to be a conversation with Eli Gold, president of the Gold Institute for International Strategy, and we're going to be discussing several things, both within the U.S. and around the world, that will affect us throughout the year. Some you're probably familiar with, some you probably haven't given much thought to. But that is precisely the idea. Now, you know Eli, so I'm not going to give you a lengthy presentation, but you can always go to goldies.org and find personal information and quite a little bit about what he's been doing for quite some time. And, you may find it about myself too. But that's the idea. Towards the end of the show, we're going to tell you some of the people we want to bring or bring back over the next few weeks. And I hope you enjoy this hour, and I hope we all learn something from Eli. I know I always do. And without further ado, let's bring him in. Good evening, Eli.
Hi, Saul. How are you?
Great. I see you're in the bunker.
I'm in the bunker. I'm in the bunker at home.
Excellent.
Just as a FYI, I noticed that Odyssey has not begun yet. I don't know.
You have. Well, one Odyssey that I have here has. The other one, because now I have to check two of them. We're going to be discussing that in a little while. Let me see, where is this? I don't know, but I'll have to check it after the show and make sure it works. I have no idea why it might not be. Let me just check one thing while you greet the quads, and I'll be with you momentarily.
Well, I appreciate that, Saul, and it's always a pleasure to start the new year with you. And what's today? Today's the 4th of January, so we're jumping right into it. Clearly, working from home is getting more things accomplished than Congress's in their first couple days in session.
I'm listening to you.
Oh, is this where I jump in here? All right.
This is where you jump in, because I'm checking to make sure that we are live on all channels. We are live on YouTube in the Gold Institute channel.
Yes,
we are live
the Gold Institute,
on Quad Verum TV.
The Gold Institute Odyssey, it does not seem to be.
We are live the Gold on Quad Verum TV. Okay, we seem to be live everywhere, Eli. So we might as well get on with this.
Other than this other channel. So, but anyway.
I'll find that out in a moment. How can it possibly be? Have you tried refreshing it?
Well, I will do that as we speak. Although I always find it. There it is. Now it goes. Yeah.
Aha. All right. You can mute it now unless you want to hear us back and forth in stereo.
No, that is. It is. We are ready to go. Saul,
We're ready to go.
I I, I
Let me explain
please.
to people what this is, because whenever you do something the first time, you have to make sure. We are simulcasting this through QVTV, both in Odyssey and YouTube, and through the Gold Institute channel in YouTube, and a new one we have set up for Quods Get Gold in Odyssey. It is a Gold Institute for International Strategy channel in Odyssey that we are going to be over the next few weeks using exclusively for these programs, so that they become, a little more of an official production of the institute, if you will. Am I correct in this, Eli?
Absolutely, I think this is an opportunity. It's really it's specifically for quads. This is an opportunity for us to grow quad verum, which is something that we all want to do. But as well as giving an opportunity to have a direct channel for quads get gold videos and conversation and so on, all under the wise and great supervision of you and yourself.
Does that mean that I'm getting a pay raise?
Double.
Ah,
Um,
excellent.
so I have to be careful when we say that. But anyway, um, so
you
so
you can treble it too.
exactly. But we say that in jest. All is good. All is good here. So yeah, I think we have. There's so much to discuss this evening. I mean, this is it's the first Quads Get Gold. I think this is my first Quads Get Gold that I'm ever participating in. So I look forward to seeing what it's like
Yes,
to be on the other side of the camera.
true, true. We've had conversations. I think we did have one in Quods Get Gold a year ago, but I'm not going to hold it against you. Um, let's go for for the first thing,
Sure.
because people, unfortunately, know very little of American history and less about civics. So, any particular event amplified through the voices of social media and partisan rags uh, becomes kind of like a novelty, a tragedy, blown entirely out of proportion. One such thing would be the election of the speaker. We're going to get into this in a moment, but I would like to remind people that it's not entirely uncommon to run into difficulties at the time of an election of a new speaker. It has happened in this country before. The old time record goes to the 1948 Congress, I believe, or 47. They had 133 votes over 2.5 months before they had a speaker. And there are a host of other times where 8, 9, 10 elections were held before we had a speaker. And now it appears that after 48 hours and 6 elections, it's the end of the world as we know it. Is it?
You know, it's certainly not the end of the world as we know it. I think that you're 100% right. This is being blown out of proportion. I think it, there's a certain duality to what we see happening. I think it's a beautiful thing that there's an actual debate about who the speaker is. I think that this is something that shouldn't necessarily be shown on we secret backroom deals as to what it's going to be and who the speaker is going to be and what it's going to look like and so on. So I think that having this struggle is very important because it shows the American people that politics needs what happens in Washington really needs to be taken seriously. So I think that's wonderful. On the other hand, I think that we've reached a point where this is hurting the process. This is hurting the party. This is hurting the process. Because what it shows is that there's this growing internal conflict. There's no question about it that the swamp needs to be drained. There's no question about it that what has been happening is not good and should not be happening. But how often are we going to? How long are we going to let this ride out for? There has to be a compromise there, and as if you and I disagree. So we have to work it out to a point where we can find a compromise. And if we can't compromise, one of us has to part ways. There's no what's happening is we have a band of 20 that have essentially created a conflict in which that they are unwilling to deviate from. The question that I have not heard anyone ask, or maybe people have asked it, but I've not heard any real answer, is pick a member of Congress or not, somebody where 218 Republicans can agree on. Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, nobody has said, you know what, we don't like McCarthy, but we like Scalise. Or we can hold our nose and vote for Scalise. They didn't say that. They're picking people like this fellow from Florida. Was it Donaldson? This is I think his third term, the beginning of his third term. He has no chance to be speaker. It would be like the equivalent of the Democrats picking Ocasio-Cortez to be speaker. I mean, she couldn't be speaker. She couldn't get the votes. She couldn't. Ocasio-Cortez couldn't get 50% of the Democrats. So the question becomes: is I think it's a good thing. So I think it's a good thing to have this debate. However, you can only have a debate if you're willing to have a resolution. If there's no resolution, then that ends. Now, there's one other point. I know I'm going long on this response, but there's one other point that I think is so key. You can have Kevin McCarthy as speaker, because it's important to remember that you meaning the 20, this band of 20, you have proven already that you can do what you're supposed to do. They can pick anyone they want. They can pick me as Speaker of the House. So
are you putting your name forward now?
With this bunch of people, no.
Be careful. They might accept it.
Listen, if Matt Gaetz votes for me, please don't have me back on Quads Get Gold. But I think what's important is, and this is the key that they're missing. Lauren Boebert stood up, and it wasn't Lauren Boebert, it was someone else from North Carolina who was on Fox News or something I was listening to in the car, and said, "No, I'm not." Oh, it was on Cavuto. I was listening to them in the car, and he says, "How come the speaker, how come Kevin McCarthy didn't come up with these great ideas that we got him to concede on? That shows he's not a true leader. The answer is not for Kevin McCarthy to come up with all these great ideas. The answer is that you, Mr. Congressman from North Carolina, the answer is that you were influential enough that you made Kevin McCarthy give in to your demands. That's how it works. Now, it's time to move on, vote for the guy, or convince 198 others to vote for your guy. But if you can't convince 198 others to vote for your guy, vote for theirs. It's time to move on.
Yep. I think we're not in disagreement, but there is something, these folks are at best amateurs, at worst partisan hacks, and I think you put the finger in the real question. The real question is, yes, you've proven that you have some influence. Yes, you can stop proceedings like you have for the past 48 hours. And yes, you can get some concessions. But in a deliberative body like this, the intransigence of a tiny group is not the way to do it. It reminds me more of a parliamentarian system, where tiny parties or 3 or 4 members hold a balance of power and determine whether the prime minister continues in government or not, and they exact a heavy price for their support. And now and then they ask for too high a price and the government collapses, or government cannot be formed. This is what these people are doing.
That is it. You touched on the next point that I would have made, and that's it. I mean, you didn't touch on it. You stated it, and that is that in Israel, someone once joked with Bibi about the idea that they're having a no confidence vote, and he said if there's a day that goes by that there is no confidence vote, I would think something's wrong.
Yes, we didn't come out of bed that morning.
Exactly.
Yes.
You touched on that because in this divided, in this divisive time that we currently are in, if you only need 5 people, which is their concession, to bring up those votes, the Democrats will be doing it every day.
Absolutely.
I mean, what's stopping
Absolutely. Can you imagine what a gift to the squad to have a rule that says that 5 representatives at any time can call for the dismissal of the speaker?
That's correct.
Can you imagine any day over the next 2 years that doesn't happen at the first moment of every session?
Correct. So there were some concessions. There were some rules made. We went back to in-person voting, no proxy voting, no Zoom voting. You have to be you have to be working. You have to be in the hearings. Some witnesses can come and testify remotely because they wanted to expand it. Expand who they can bring to testify. However, the members themselves have to show up to work. What a novel idea that is! You have to show
Imagine
up
that. I don't think there is anybody watching this that wouldn't be in agreement with all of these.
Correct. So this is this is so important because when we talk about you're talking about Quods Get Gold, and what's so important is for members of Congress and lawmakers across the globe is really to understand what are the ramifications of the policies that you make. I'm not to make this about the Gold Institute, but I think that this is it's a good way to explain what you and I are talking about here, and that is you know, you have so many think tanks and so many organizations and so many members of Congress, and everybody has great ideas, and they're all great ideas. I mean, that's the beauty of America. We live on these ideas, we thrive on them, and many of them work and create a success that we have. No other country in history has had the successes that we've had in such a short period of time. And but it's always important to stop for a moment and think, okay, what are the second and third and fourth order effects? One of the concessions that were made with McCarthy was that a certain amount of time has to be allotted between the time we introduce a piece of legislation and the time we vote on it. You can't have a $1.7 trillion spending bill with 24 hours to read it. It doesn't work that way. You can't read 4,000 pages in 24 hours. Saul, you can, but the average member of Congress...
Yeah, but I can, but if I were in Congress, if the regular order is followed, I wouldn't have to. The notion that somebody like Lauren Boebert can understand any portion of a 2,700-page bill if she's given 3 years to read it is rather preposterous.
Well, I don't want
and that's why we worked in committees. And like I said, like I gave you her name, I could have given you another 400 names. That's why the work of Congress is performed in committees, where everything that goes into the bill is discussed and negotiated ad nauseam, theoretically by the people who are most familiar with the process and the numbers.
But
then, if it gets a committee approval, goes to the floor with the recommendation of the committee, and most people will vote according to the recommendation of the people they trust in the committee.
Well, I hearken back
That's the way it's always worked.
But that's correct. I hearken back to Mr. Smith, who actually read all the bills because he didn't know that he wasn't supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that and here I agree with, while I agree with you, I do take exception to one point. And that is, it's up to you and I, it's up to the individual member, not you and I, but the individual member, to determine whether they want to take the committee suggestion, recommendation or not. But we have to give them the opportunity to actually read the bill, because it's their prerogative whether they want to read the bill or not. They're voting on it, and they represent their constituents. So I think that what these are concessions that were made, and those are good concessions. I think that was it. But all too often what happens is that policies are made. And policy suggestions are made, but without practical understanding of the issue. Have they ever spent any time in the field, in that field? Have they ever spent any time so do they understand firsthand? For example, we now have a record. I think it's the record number, or in modern history. Recently we have a significant number of military personnel who are actually elected to Congress. I think at one point in time it was only 17% of Congress that actually served in the military. I think that number has grown. So they have an understanding of pieces of bills that are related to defense.
Yes.
What we've done is, and that's why we created the Institute the way we did, because we wanted people who have experience and understanding in their respective fields, so that way when a policy is put into place, they already know the second and third order effects when we make a recommendation. What we see happening on Capitol Hill right now is you have members of Congress who have been there for a very short period of time. Some of them may not have been there at all. This might be their first foray into this, and to say, well, this is what we want. Okay, great. I love your enthusiasm, but what happens next?
What is the consequence of this that you are asking for?
That's correct. there has to be a middle ground between allowing the squad to call for a vote every day on McCarthy and what Nancy Pelosi did, which ruled with an iron fist, and she
Yep.
did, she had the proxy of everybody else. So anyway, but those are my thoughts.
Absolutely. And there is something else, because the vocabulary that is being used is I consider singularly damaging. There are people who are questioning McCarthy's patriotism and integrity because he wants the speaker position more than he loves the country. Well, the same can be said of the 20 intransigent people who are willing to stop the country and stop the business of Congress if they don't get their demands. So I would stay away from that type of diatribe. The second one is that, and I heard this one today, that McCarthy and the Republican Party ought to respect the democratic process, and there are people who don't want McCarthy, and I would say, well, yes, that's fine, but if you speak so highly of a democratic process, there are 203 out of 222 Republican congressmen who do want McCarthy, and that would be a majority insurmountable for these people. They might as well accept the will of that humongous majority. And of course, they keep proposing, I don't know, Jim Jordan, who apparently doesn't want the position. He proposed McCarthy and votes for him every time. Or this guy from Florida, who I'm sure has to ask for directions if he ever needs to go to the bathroom in the Capitol. And that is not good for anybody. It's perhaps what offends me the most is the low intellectual level of the discussions. And I know we're talking about Congress, but I expected more.
Well, this is an issue that's gone on for quite some time. I mean, I will say this. I mean, some of the issues that this squad of 20 is bringing up are some significant and serious issues. I would not want to take that away from them. I mean, these are things that are important. I certainly don't want to take away some of the things that they're talking about. I just think that there's an opportunity, a time to do it, and the time is not now. That was my anyone who follows me on social media saw that I posted from Michael Corleone, never discuss family business outside the family.
Outside the family, yes.
And
yeah, absolutely.
There's a time and place, and we've for a typical debate, this is great. However, we've gone past the debate, and now we're airing the dirty laundry, and that's a problem. So but there's so much more to talk about, so much more to discuss. I think that
yes, I would say that on that note, we seem to be in general agreement. If there are particulars that we look upon with a different point of view, if you will, but I have something to show you here that I'm sure you would appreciate, seeing what you just said. Let me see if I can set this up. And I have to make sure I have audio in this thing, so it'll be just 1 second. And I found it. That's good news. Oh, yes. I believe that this is what you've been posting in social media.
you're getting a commission for that.
Well, I hope I do too, but for some reason, it's not
You paused
actually.
it.
I did, didn't I? This is what happens.
With anyone against the family again. You off the top, Mike? You're unlucky.
Well, this is the beginning of this whole.
So,
You
yeah,
guys really make me laugh.
the family
I do you a favor
outside
and
the
take credit when you're having
family.
a bad time.
This is a golden rule, which, by the way, doesn't apply only to Cosa Nostra. It applies to common sense and everybody's family and everybody's internal affairs. You don't wash your dirty clothing in public, and these people are washing their soiled panties in public.
100%, 100%. But I know we're in agreement on that.
Well, next one. What shall we expect once this thing is resolved one way or another? And I expect that it will be soon. I don't have to tell you that my personal wish is that this is resolved, that McCarthy becomes the speaker, and we move on. There are many things that McCarthy promised to do in the first days, including removing some characters from committees, because, say, you cannot have somebody in the Intelligence Committee that bets a Chinese spy. You cannot have somebody in a committee that calls journalists from the bathroom to leak information of closed-door meetings. You cannot have somebody in a committee on foreign relations who spouts anti-Semitic remarks every other day because, frankly, it reflects very poorly on the body. And and many people watching us know, that I'm referring to specific congressmen and women that McCarthy has already stated he intends to remove them. And he intended to create some subcommittees, like a subcommittee on the judiciary, to investigate the undue influence, to put it mildly, of law enforcement and federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies in social media and media in general. All of those things are now withheld until this is resolved. I expect this will be resolved so that we can get to the real issues soon. What should we expect from a Republican Congress?
So I think,
years?
Listen, everything
or House rather, not Congress.
Right, House. Everything that you just described is going to happen. We're going to see more accountability. In the past, Nancy Pelosi didn't really care about accountability. She cared about an agenda that was not so much as getting their liberal policies in place, but rather getting their dual state in place. It was more about taking down Donald Trump and the Republican Party rather than actual issues and policies that they wanted to put forth. Of course, we saw that they had an agenda, and those pieces of legislation passed, and in particular due to the proxy voting that she had. So there's going to be certainly accountability at the forefront, and that's just within Congress. We're going to see that Congress, and this is something that I've been working on for quite some time, and many others at the Institute. What Congress has done is it has ceded its authority to the administration. Now, this has been going on for many administrations. This is many years that this has been going on. This isn't something that the Democrats gave Joe Biden, and I don't necessarily mean quite literally that they gave the authority to the administration to the president, but they gave it to the agencies, which are run by the administration. And the agencies created rules. they created these rules that were not voted on by Congress. And when we talk, and what they've essentially done was created a dual state. A dual state is where you have a group of people that are setting the agenda for the country, setting the rules, setting the laws. They're not really laws, but they're the policies, and it's counter to what Americans want, what Congress, the way our government was set up. The Congress is now going to be, you'll see, at least in the House, is going to take back much of the authority that they had ceded in the past. So we're going to see a lot of that happening in the early days. A little bit of it is going to be create a political firestorm, because as Saul, as you mentioned, we're going to see certain people losing certain committee seats, which happens all the time. Steve King, who was a friend of mine, he was a very conservative fellow from Iowa. He gave an interview to the New York Times, which, in the days following, I asked him, like, Steve, what were you thinking? But then he didn't record it on his own. When you do an interview with a sketchy other side, the New York Times, for example,
always keep your copy.
Always have your tape recorder going, or recorder, whatever we have nowadays. So that way you have evidence of what you said, and the New York Times said he was a racist, and he said racist things and so on. And of course, the Republicans at the time, I think it was Paul Ryan, stripped him of all his committee assignments. So we're going to see. And that created a storm, of course, and we're going to see that happening now. Especially, it's going to create a bigger storm because it's on the other side of the aisle. We're going to see a special committee set up for Hunter Biden, and we're going to see committees set up to impeach Mayorkas and several others. So these are things that, quite frankly, look political. Parenthetically, probably are political, but it's also Congress taking back their authority. This isn't some random thing about whether Donald Trump. Maybe it is. Donald Trump. What was his influence, and should we look at his tax returns or not? This is something that actually impacts the country. But then we're going to start focusing on things that matter. For example, the war in Ukraine. We've been giving a lot of money to the war. You and I have spoken about this, and I've spoken to many others about this as well.
Yes.
We're giving a lot of money to Ukraine. McCarthy said, as well as many other Republicans said, you know what, we're fine with giving money to Ukraine, but we just need to know, where's this money going, and what are the intentions? What are the intentions? You give your kids money. You say, I want to know, where are you going? You're spending this money. You're going to the movies. Great. Is that all you're doing? And if that's all you're doing, then you don't need it. It's been a while since I've been to the theater, but you probably don't need $50. Maybe $20 is good enough. Am I dating myself?
You've definitely not been in a theater for quite a while.
All right, you don't need $100. Maybe you do. But that's the idea. For me, my attitude towards the war in Ukraine is I support it completely, regardless of whether Ukraine is whether they're corrupt or not. The corruption inside Ukraine does not give Vladimir Putin the authority to go into another country.
Yes. So let's face it, the corruption in the White House doesn't give Vladimir Putin the authority to go into Ukraine either.
That's correct. But
it is a facetious argument.
Correct. That's true. I'll grant you that. But I think the question that McCarthy wants to ask is the same question that I have,
Well,
and that
make sure
is,
there is accountability.
is it our intention to win the war in Ukraine? So I mean, for the Ukrainians to win the war, is it our intention? Yes. Then give them, instead of giving them $40 billion, give them $80 billion. I'm picking random numbers. Don't quote me in the paper. I'm picking random numbers.
It's coming out of the magician's hat.
Give them $80 billion so that way they can win the war tomorrow. By giving them these this trickle down defense, you're only prolonging the war. You're not giving them the opportunity to win.
Yes.
So we're going to see a lot more of that happening within the House of Representatives over the years. It's very important for people to understand one thing, and this and with this I'll stop. But people often get confused and think that foreign affairs is the sole purview of the president.
No,
the president is our senior foreign affairs officer. It's not the Secretary of State, it's the president.
Yes.
In fact, in today's day and age, I would contend that we don't need a Secretary of State. We needed a Secretary of State because it would take you 2 weeks to get to France or longer. And then they have 2 weeks there.
For people who don't know this, ambassadors do not represent the United States, they represent the president.
That's correct. Well, they represent the Secretary of State, who represents the president.
They're personal representatives of the President of the United States, originally. I agree with you, we don't need a Secretary of State anymore, but there are so many things we don't need.
That's correct. So I think that what we're going to see is we're going to see the House really take a look at things and really see where their authority is, and can they take it back. That's going to be very important. Yes. That's going to be very important.
And if I recall my civics, it is up to Congress to instruct the president on foreign matters.
There's a certain authority that the president has. The Congress has to approve what he does. They don't necessarily have to. They don't necessarily have to endorse it. Treaties.
Remember the 1979 Taiwan Act, where Congress instructed the president how to handle Taiwan after betraying China?
Correct. I didn't say that Congress can't do that. I'm saying that's typically, but there are many things. That's how the Abraham Accords began. Everybody here has heard.
I'm sorry, did I say betraying China? Betraying the Republic of China, mind you.
Right. But that is where. But I think that is very important. It's an important point. I mean, that's where treaties come from Congress. Something that the Iran nuclear deal, which was supposed to be a treaty, but was never ratified by Congress.
Exactly. If the Senate doesn't ratify it, a treaty, it is not.
That's correct. Although it does, after a certain period of time, take the effect like a treaty, but it is not. Which is how President Trump was able to
walk it back,
to remove ourselves from this Iran nuclear deal. The Abraham Accords, on the other hand, for example, was a treaty. Essentially, it was created to be a treaty anyway.
And essentially, once the Senate ratifies and the president proclaims a treaty, it becomes a part of the Constitution.
Precisely.
And it's part of our supreme law. So it is an interesting thing that most people miss.
Correct.
But our, discussions in newspapers in 1820 were far more clear on this subject.
I think people were more educated. I think people took pride and were more educated than they are today.
Oh, that's a different discussion, though. Did we have more intelligent, educated people, or people doing certain jobs were required to be intelligent and educated, and the rest never had access to, and today they do?
Well, it's interesting. This is a topic for a different time. But
Yes. I'll leave it bouncing there because that would be a whole hour of discussion, I'll bet. Uh, in the house, uh, I would complete this with people who have uh, overblown expectations as to what the Republicans can do in the next 2 years. So we're already starting with people who claim that now that we have a Republican House, we can right the ship and undo the laws and do laws. And my impression is that we can have a lot more congressional oversight, which will receive whatever press coverage the scribes of the country are willing to grant it, but no law is going to become a law without the Senate and the President. So the possibility of repealing some legislation or imposing some will on the President or legislating on a particular issue is very small and limited to those ever fewer items in which Democrats and Republicans can agree.
correct.
So I don't expect a revolution in legislation. I don't expect, you mentioned the draining of the swamp. I don't expect any creature of the swamp to feel threatened in any way because, frankly, it's not enough power.
So I hear this is going to be a very interesting, very very interesting time, Saul, because the this is where the House, where we really see what the House is supposed to be doing. The House has budgetary authority that and can really hold the purse strings, and that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Hmm.
You know, we always talk about, and you and I have spoken about this, and anyone who pays attention to politics, even in a minute fashion, always harkens back to President Reagan and Tip O'Neill.
Oh, yes.
The Republicans today have a great opportunity to show the American people precisely who we are and what we can do. What is it that we stand for? Now, I'm not suggesting that all the Republicans need to adhere to a 10-point manifesto. But this is an opportunity for the Republicans to say no. It's okay to say no. It's for people for Republicans to really take a look and see where they can compromise with the Democrats when appropriate, when to say absolutely not when appropriate, and show the American people what our government is supposed to be doing. You know, I love Grover Norquist's line where he talks about the idea of his dream to have a government small enough that he can drown it in a bathtub.
Yes.
And I agree. I think that that government is bloated and is way just bloated way out of anything that our founders ever believed, regardless of the size of the country. This is an opportunity for for Americans to see what it is that Congress is supposed to be doing. Holding the president accountable, holding the other branches accountable, saying, but yet compromising when appropriate. If we can do that, 2024 will be the year of the Republican.
Indeed. Grover Norquist, that you just mentioned, is the founder of the, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, the Americans for Tax Reform, isn't he?
That's correct. Americans for Tax Reform, which is
For decades, he's been leading that charge.
he created this institution at the request of President Ronald Reagan. He's a dear friend of mine, and he is somebody who really understands what it means to have limited government. And this is something that the Democrats can't do. You know, he has every Wednesday a meeting called the Wednesday meeting. And and I think it's in 48 states he has one, but he has one main one in Washington, and then I think on the state level they have it once a month or so. But I don't know much about it other than what I just said.
Than the one in DC.
Correct, and on the state level, I don't know. You would have to. You can email Americans for Tax Reform and find out. But and everybody in the room, you have 150 people in a room. And in an hour and a half, I'll have 25 speakers present. And each one presents on what they're working on. If you care about the issue that you just heard about, then great. See how you can get involved. See how your institution can get involved. If you don't care about it, just ignore it. But this is something that only can be done on the right. Because everybody in that room agrees on one point: the need for a limited government. Now, the left, they can't have such a meeting because everybody on the left, they want something. They want something, and the way it works on the left is if I get it, that means you lose it. I am an environmentalist. Therefore, you, Saul, who just wants to abort babies, still wants to drive your SUV, gas-guzzling SUV. Well,
absolutely.
Now you're angry at me because I'm trying to take away your SUV. But while I love the planet.
No, I'm not angry at you. I'll just drive my SUV over you.
Precisely. So that's really what happened. You know, so this is
that. But by the way, that was a joke, folks, not a threat.
I've been threatened by better people than you, or worse people, however you want to look at it, right? But anyway.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. Grover has a Madisonian approach to these. The larger the government, the lesser the freedom.
That's
and I agree with him. I think a bathtub is too large a vehicle. I would like to be able to have a government small enough I can drown it in a Demetas.
Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm. There is no question, and this is my position. Doesn't have to be yours, but I believe our founder fathers understood this better than anybody else in the world in their time. Yes, we do need a measure of government to keep a civilized society going. But it has to be the minimalist expression of the absolute necessary constituent arms of government to ensure the smooth flowing of society, and no more. Because inevitably, the larger the government grows, the larger the amount of freedoms we lose.
Correct.
One of their wisest moves was the separation of powers, in order to keep government branches in check and one controlling the other so that no excesses could become permanent. And you mentioned a little while ago in this program this transfer, which indeed is more of an usurpation of the powers of the legislature by executive branch agencies. And you didn't mention anyone specifically, but I can say that any autarkic, self governing government agency is an expression of that. They usurp the powers of the legislation, of the legislature, and then they usurp the powers of the judiciary as well. They become branches of the executive that legislate, enforce that legislation, and adjudicate any kind of dispute within that legislation they created. That is exactly what our founding fathers were trying to avoid.
Correct.
But now we can have an agency that decides that whatever comes out of of your nose is a dangerous gas that needs to be controlled. And if you exhale more than a certain amount, you are heavily fined, and then inspector from that agency will go to your house and threaten with taking possession of it if you don't pay your fine. And if you have a problem with it, you can, of course, appeal to the agency itself that will determine whether they want to hear you or not.
Precisely.
And the separation of powers goes out the window, and we become servants of the state.
Correct.
I think Grover is one of the few men in the U.S. today that understands that process in its completeness.
That's correct. So I know that you had asked me to talk about what to expect from the Institute.
Yes.
In the and I see that time is running. I know that you and I have had, you can talk for hours as we have done before on your other programs. But I thought that maybe we should talk about some of the things that we're going to be doing in the over the next several months. So I mean, I believe that you and I spoke about this on one of your programs, or you did as well. That you traveled with me to Europe as we were talking with ambassadors and members of parliaments regarding some issues. And these are some of the influences that we have at the Institute, and all doing what I think is good work. But over the next 12 months, we have several big projects. I mean, really larger projects that we're working on, which I thought that might be interesting to the viewers. And so I thought that maybe we would talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
We have something that we need to do right away. It's called ASAP. But it's actually called Administrative State Accountability Project.
Oh, yes. That's my favorite one, by the way.
So we always we talk about this deep state, or this administrative state, and it's very important to really understand what that is. We talk about the deep state, and well, people talk about the deep state, and that's typically in social media, so in social media rantings. But we're looking at an administrative state, and I've referenced this before in passing. The idea that you have an administrative state, which is dual. It's a two-track, and on track number one is everything that we see going on. But then in track number two are all of these people that are in this bloated government that have their own agendas.
The apparatchiks.
That's correct. These bloated. This is whether they seek power, they seek influence, they seek financial gain, and so on. And we have what we have been able to do is really map this process, this dual state, this administrative state, and by doing that, we're able to bring to light really what's happening and what's going on. And now that you have a House of Representatives that has an interest in seeking accountability. We really need the Senate as well, but this is a project that has really taken taken hold. The number of people, of whistleblowers that Congress has been reluctant to address, that have come forward and really helped map this through, is staggering. And I believe that we're going to we'll see some real progress on this. We have a couple more, but let me, one in particular. There are two in particular that I find really fascinating. I'm going to save the one that you joined me on for last, but we see what's happening. If people see what's happening in Iran, let's take a step back for a moment. We saw the need to go into Afghanistan. We saw the need to go into Iraq. And I'm not gonna debate right now whether we should have ever gone in there or we shouldn't have, whether we should have stayed or we should have left, how we should have left. Conversation for a different time, preferably with a good scotch in hand. But again, we'll save that for another time.
Glenn finish 18 and up.
There you go. So the idea is, I would prefer a Belvini, but we can
compromise one of each.
There you go.
In endless succession.
But the one thing that we have never done before, or so it would seem, is to plan in advance for what happens when the conflict is over. What happens when we win or lose, but what happens when we win? Now what? We see there's a revolution happening in Iran right now.
Yes.
It's about 110 days ago or so, Mahsa Jina Amini was killed for taking off her headscarf. This beautiful young Kurdish Iranian woman who, because she took off her headscarf, ironically, the morality police beat her to death. That sparked a revolution that has gone from Kurdistan region to Tehran and now throughout the country. We're doing two things. Number one is we're involved in really mapping. I keep on using that term, but I think it's important. Planning the path forward, not in government of Iran after the regime falls, which I believe it will, but what will happen afterwards for the people. How are they going to get food? How are they going to get power, electricity, healthcare, and so on? And that's something that really needs to be thought out. Rarely do we ever do that. Take a look at what's happening in Afghanistan now. Women are no longer allowed to go to school, and so on. So we have to.
We knew that.
We knew that was going to be the problem.
You and I said it in one of our conversations in this very channel.
That's correct. But I'm saying
the only people who were trying to tell us that a kinder, gentler Taliban was in no position to take over the country in 2 years, and when they did, were going to govern like a benign party that they had become, are in government today in the U.S., and didn't have the foggiest idea what they were talking about.
That's correct. But this is more on the substantive level. How are we going to get resources to the people that need it? And that's what we're mapping out. Then the final thing that I want to talk about in particular is our Iraq Freedom Initiative. The Institute has been tasked with creating a new and more stable government in Iraq. The U.S. and our allies went into Iraq. We overthrew Saddam, and we created a new government. It's a parliamentary system.
Yes.
The problem with it is that because it's the parliamentary system, it allowed Iran to come in and take a more
A,
a
a,
substantive role in
a larger role than they deserved.
they don't deserve any, but
Precisely.
what it allowed them to do was usurp
Yes.
the government in Baghdad. And the reason for that is quite simply that the members of parliament are predominantly Shia, but in particular they are pro-Iranian Shia because
Yes.
the Shia bloc is the largest bloc. What
Yeah.
ultimately what
But
that
but it's not for you know, I do understand everything you're saying, but for folks who are watching this,
please
the larger block is the Shia block, but it's not a homogeneous block. It
that's
is
correct.
divided. It is divided in many ways, but most importantly in Shia who are beholden to Iran and patriotic Iranian Iraqi Shia, and the two uh, do not get along so well.
Correct. But what's most important to understand is that the pro-Iranian parliamentarians, the dynamics of the situation, it 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 it, it allows them to take a larger role.
Yep.
Because even if I may not support you, I may be too reluctant to vote against you.
Yes.
So, without getting into the details at the present moment, what we've been tasked is to identify, to create that path forward and create a way to restructure the government because right now they have they have
It's
no real government.
dysfunctional.
The president, the prime minister is all but neutered. I think they just elected a president. The Supreme Court is controlled by Iran, Iranian proxies, and so on.
Yep.
So this is very damaging, and
No,
people.
they spent about a year in a virtual state of acephaly.
That's correct, and people are concerned. People are really may question why do we really care? But we really care because number one, we have energy issues. Number two is
Yes.
from an international security perspective. Iraq is really the first line against Iran. So this is something that we care deeply about. That is something that I've been traveling, throughout Europe, speaking with our allies in various different parliaments and so on, and. In fact, Saul came with me on one of my trips. That's something that I'm really very pleased about. I'm really very thrilled that we were able to and play a role in that. So with that, I think that I was
That,
just
that
giving.
that does that mean I can talk now?
Please.
No. I don't mean now. Now I mean no. Not until I speak with you. But as you know, I've been mum on our trip and
Oh
what we were doing there.
listen. You know me. I love speaking in generalities, but
Yes.
you can.
In generalities, have you noticed that the Italians are now considering modifying the Italian constitution to turn the government in Italy into a more presidential government, because they have figured out that this parliamentary system they have been enjoying since the end of World War II is terribly inefficient and unstable.
Yes, there's talk of it. They're working towards it, but I think it's going to take a bit of time
Oh no,
before.
it will. But the fact that they're talking about it is very germane to what we were thinking, isn't
That's
it?
correct. That is correct. And in fact, in fact, their prime minister just came back from Iraq, and
Yes,
spent a good deal of time in Erbil. So that
yes.
is That's always a positive sign. Saul, listen, I'm thrilled about the upcoming year for Quads
Yep.
Get Gold. I'm thrilled about the upcoming year, and it would be inappropriate of me to end this call as you and I were talking. All the it's up to me to sign all of these papers and letters, and I sent individual letters to every one of our donors, and which will be coming over the next few days. And the love for the Gold Institute that Quad Verum at large has shown over the year is fantastic. I would love to personally share the names of people who have contributed and supported us, but I think that that's highly inappropriate. But people certainly should be able to do that on Quad Verum and the Quad SQV. So I really want to thank you all for that.
Well, I'm sure you'll keep the dialogue going with them in SQV, and let me remind everybody that they can support what we are doing here and the institute by sending a donation to the link that I'm showing right now, https $donorbox.org/gv gets gold. You have it over there, and we're going to. It is in the description under the screen in all channels. So please, it is a tax-deductible contribution to the Gold Institute, and it has nothing to do with your support for ongoing support for Quad Verum. That is also very much appreciated, and without which we wouldn't have SQV or any of these programs.
Absolutely.
And please, I know it's the end of the year. You just barely made it to the end of the mile after the expenditures of the holidays. But if you can find it, it doesn't have to be tremendously large amounts. Buy us a cappuccino every now and then. That should do it.
I would, Saul, may I just invite everybody to, if we can, if Quad Verum, and I would pose this to you. I know you're down in Florida. If Quad Verum
Yes.
wants to put together a date where I'm happy to come, we can all meet in person and have that scotch, talk about whatever it is. We can do that in Washington. We can do that in Florida. If we do it during the winter, I would prefer
This is the winter. We need to do it in Florida so you can escape the Washington
if we do
snow
it in
doldrums.
Correct. If we do it in, but I would definitely love to do that. So, just tell me, pick a date, and we can.
We'll do. I'll talk to people in SQV, see if we can get a core, and I'm thinking maybe Palm Beach, Orlando,
Well, if you do
Sarasota,
if
something.
you do it in Orlando, maybe I can bring some of our fellows in particular who are up in the Daytona, Orlando area.
Exactly. That's precisely what I was thinking of that. And hopefully we can do that and have some more folks and turn it into a very interesting meeting for those who attend.
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of fun. And I know that you have some guests coming. So I don't know who specifically on for next week, but I know that you have the likes of Jessie Jane Duff, who you had, and
Yes.
Antifad Kanbar.
Always glad to have the Ghani around.
Exactly. So
Yes, and she better be on your side, because
So I have some.
If
So
not-
I have some news. I have some news, if I may. Just real quick. I know we are way over time, and people are probably ready to sign off. Gunnery Sergeant Jessie Jane Duff has joined the Gold Institute as a media fellow.
yes,
Major General Mahmoud Hassan has joined the Gold Institute as a distinguished fellow. He was a 2-star general who represented Egypt to the United States and Canada. Their military has joined the institute. Toshio Masuda, who is an advisor to the Japanese Prime Minister, he joined the Gold Institute. So we've expanded. Things are looking good, and I know that you're going to have a fantastic year moving forward.
Yes. We have, I believe we have to get, if we can, Americans for Tax Reform into one of these so that we can discuss with folks some of the ideas that have come out of there and why we need them.
Absolutely. So let's work on that, and let's until next time, Saul. I appreciate you having me on.
Will do. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your coming and talking to us. And pretty soon we're going to be posting next week's Quods Get Gold, and whoever it is, you're definitely going to learn something and enjoy it. No question about that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody who's watching us on YouTube or Odyssey. And I'll see you next week with another hour to learn a little bit about the world. Good night, all.
Thank you.